So, hello to those of you out there. Don't necessarily want to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening because um, not sure what time it is where you're watching this. And so, welcome. My name is Jake Schultz. I am a historian, aviation historian, specializing in flying cars. I want to thank Philippe Veron and the folks at Veron Vehicles for putting on this session. Glad to be here. My background has been in aviation, and in particular, I got to know Molt Taylor. So, Molt Taylor, for those of you who don't know, he developed the Aero car. The Aero car was developed from the late 40s through the 70s, and he initially built a prototype. Then he built 5 production Aero cars. They were a small vehicle that would tow a trailer, and it would be able to get to the airport, attach the wings, and it would be able to fly. And the unique thing about the Aero car is, in addition to the amphibian, this air vehicle, the Aero car, was licensed and certified by the CAA, which is later became the FAA. So this was a certified aircraft, and the vehicle could be driven on the roads. It had 2 people, had an aircraft engine, and again, it would tow the wings. You could leave the wings at home, or you could leave the wings at an airport, and you could take off and fly in the vehicle. Now, what Molt Taylor chose to do was to develop an aircraft that people would use more often than a traditional aircraft. So, historically speaking, people want to go places, and you can fly or you can drive, you can take a train. There's multiple ways to go. The automobile is extremely convenient, very, very nice to travel around in. But if you want to go on a longer trip, say 300-mile trip or something, say a 500-mile trip, that's a longer trip to travel. And Molt would travel in his light plane with his wife Lillian prior to World War II, and they had some small aircraft that they owned, and they would fly those. But then when they would land at an airport, they wouldn't have a way to get into town and go to dinner or get to a hotel or something. And the rental car system wasn't as set up as it is now. So they wanted to be able to have a vehicle, a single vehicle that they could use to fly further than they would normally drive, and then have a useful vehicle after they landed. Things haven't changed. That was 1956 when his aircraft was certified, and in that time frame, the interstate hadn't been developed. There wasn't as easy to get around with an automobile as there is now here, certainly in America. Some of the other countries like Colombia, there are certainly road systems, but it's still difficult to make a long trip with an automobile. And flying is a wonderful way to get there. So the same as it is then as it is now, people have a desire to get around, to be places, to be able to travel and to conduct business, or to have meet with friends, or just go on vacation. And people want to be able to do that. And it's all about mobility. In a large city, the mobility is gridlock, unfortunately, these days. And it was back in the 50s when Molt Taylor developed the Aero car as well. So what's nice about what's going on these days is there's so many people working on so many different designs. In particular, my strength is the background, the history, the people who developed the flying cars, in particular Molt Taylor's flying car, but the people who developed flying cars and were just very excited to have a way to get around and to be able to then have a vehicle in which to move around after you landed at your destination. Molt Taylor he demonstrated the Aero car at the Pentagon for a while, and he would park it at the hotel, and sometimes he would need the wings, and sometimes he would just take the little car and drive to the Pentagon in this case. And so in the morning, the people who were storing the wings in the car at the hotel, the valet would say, "Mr. Taylor, do you need your wings today?" Because sometimes he would need to demonstrate the Aero car with the wings at an airport, and sometimes he would just be going out to dinner with his wife locally. And so they had the flexibility to be able to fly, or they had the flexibility to be able to drive. Now, of course, a lot of the things that are developed these days aren't particularly designed specifically to work on the roads, but the Aero car was, and so was the Aeromobile, and so were so many of the vehicles developed back in the 50s and 60s. That kind of work continues today. There's a lot of folks studying things, and as a historian, I just really encourage people to learn from the past, learn from what has happened before, learn about the difficulties that they had and some of the things that they did extremely well. A lot of the automobile regulations back in the 50s, for instance, were fairly relaxed. And as Molt Taylor developed his first aero car, his Model 3, he called it, which was the second generation, a lot of the automobile regulations had become more strict. So ironically, nowadays you can build an aircraft in the experimental category, and the automobile regulations are your more stringent regulations than the experimental aircraft regulations. And so, again, historically speaking, this has been the dream of people for a long time, to be able to move about more freely, to have a vehicle to get them around more conveniently. Molt Taylor and I would drive by the airport, and he would look over and he would say, "Look at all those airplanes. Look at those airplanes that are all sitting there." He said, "And none of them can drive to the store. They're all just sitting there." And so he wanted to develop a vehicle that would be used more often, that would be used as much more often than a traditional aircraft is used. Now, I myself, my wife and I live here at an air park in Oregon. So if we want to go fly, we can walk to the other room, open up the hangar door, and we can taxi out about 100 feet to the runway, and I can go fly somewhere. That is really a beautiful thing. We really, really love living here at the airport and having that opportunity. But the vast majority of people, they don't have that opportunity. They could park a car or an airplane at home, but then they would have to somehow figure out either to tow the wings, or they'd have to figure out a way to get to the airport. My personal solution is to be able to live here at the airport. For a lot of people, they want to be able to go from where they live to where they want to go, and they want to do that in a vehicle that provides them wonderful mobility. So I wish all of you a lot of success. I encourage you to learn from the past, learn from what people have learned from years gone by or even recently, and just really enjoy the journey, enjoy the process of creating something that doesn't exist yet, a means of mobility that doesn't yet, people might not be able to imagine, but maybe you can imagine it and you can bring it into being. So enjoy your day, enjoy the time listening to a lot of these presentations, and just really remember that a lot of people came before you to work on these same projects. And so it's very exciting that so many people are working on the same dream today. So thank you.